I remember going down to Crested Butte and skiing in a place called Pioneer Mountain, which is actually between Crested Butte and Gunnison. And they had a great chairlift, old chairlift down there that was powered by a pickup truck where the operator sat with the truck tipped back and he shifted the gears and propelled the ski lift. But it was built by the local people and out of Swiss mining equipment that they appropriated because the Swiss hadn't appeared for 10 years and they thought by that time it was theirs. Going over to Aspen again, they had an old boat tow there that took people part way up the lower slopes of the Roche Run, and that went up, took a load of people up, I think 10, 12 people, and then dropped them off, and then it came back down and picked up another. It probably had a capacity of about 50 people per hour. You know, today we take 2,500 skiers an hour on the, or 2,000 an hour on the chairlifts and the gondolas and so on. So areas that where 10th Mountain people were involved, particularly here in Colorado, were certainly Arapahoe Basin with Larry Jump, Sandy Schaufler. Loveland, I was involved in there when we kind of moved from rope tows to chairlifts. You know, there were some in Aspen, and then a large number of us were kind of congregated in Vail, I guess because of the size of Vail and opportunities there. Well, initially, the ski areas here in Colorado were smaller, and they attracted primarily a local audience. A lot of the American skiers used to go to Europe to ski, and now we see a turnaround. Our resorts have developed. Our snow conditions are typically better than Europe, are more consistent, and the Europeans are coming this way. So it's grown from a kind of a mom and pop operation to, in the terms of the ski areas, to larger international resorts. The good thing about that, of course, is the fact that we now have access to people who can afford to travel and so on from on a worldwide basis. I'd like to say yes, but it's so difficult. The state government is talking about, you know, they're concerned with overbuilding and so on, and I think those are proper concerns, but at the same time, why, ultimately, you know, Vail and Snowmass, for example, are not going to be able to expand to take care of the demand, total demand over the years. I think other resorts will come in, but it's a function of timing. And right now, I don't think there's that much demand for a major ski area.
Peter, I can remember the first time I ever came to Vail. It was in September of 1966, and I'd been in Colorado about 6 months. And someone had arranged for us to go out and play golf. You and one of your early and prominent investors named Dick Hauserman.
Oh, yes.
And at that time, Vail had a 9-hole golf course, and there were boulders all along the side. When you were in the rough, you were really in the rough. And now, how many golf courses? 5, 6, maybe 10 tomorrow?
Tomorrow, they're actually, with the opening of Wild Horse, and in a couple of years, I think there'll be 8 golf courses total.
That's
it's
amazing.
hard to believe. The big problem, however, is that not enough of them are public.
But, you know, that sort of points up what's happening in the Colorado ski industry. Of course, there has to be a summer side, but of course there would be none of the golf courses if there were not a winter side. One supports the other. And this, to me, just represents how Colorado skiing and Colorado resorts, which are inseparable, have grown over the years.
The local people, you know, they had no idea what was going to happen. We had some idea, but I think what we did not realize was how the sport of skiing was going to grow. And that's what took over, certainly during the early days of Vail.
Well, in a way, I'm sort of the appointed watchdog of the ski industry, in that I am supposed to, as a reporter, look to see that everything's kosher and things don't get misrepresented. My role is to, I believe, to create excitement, because I think that's what my readers want. They want to be excited about this sport. That's why people buy ski magazines and go to Warren Miller ski movies, and I try to get that in my writing as a whole. And Peter, as a resort developer and someone who's trying to get people to come up to ski, he's trying to help that process naturally. Sometimes he's at the start of that process and letting me and all other news media know about what's going on up in the mountains. So in a way, there's a bit of a partnership, but also I'm not at all affiliated, of course. I'm from the position of an observer, and my position is to be the eyes of the skiing public.
Well, it's interesting because when we first started Vail, and earlier, as far as my career is concerned, at Loveland, we couldn't get very many positive comments out of Denver, and particularly in the early days of Vail. They weren't that interested in skiing. It was interesting, and it's changed. It's changed a great deal now.
Peter, what were some of yours and Bob Parker's really clever schemes to attract attention to Vail? I know there were some.
One of the earliest things that took place was people used to ask, well, how big is Vail? How big is Vail going to be? How large? And the idea of going out and creating a resort and flying in the face of Aspen and Winter Park was almost heresy. I mean, you just shouldn't even be thinking about that. I remember taking the geodetic or geographic survey maps and the contour maps and taking the Vail Mountain front side, back side, and saying, okay, we can ski around this way and around that way, around Sundown Bowl, Sunup Bowl, front side of the mountain, and then laying that out, and then taking the existing ski areas, Winter Park, Arapahoe, Aspen at the time, Berthoud Pass, Loveland ski area, and putting them all within what we were going to open up the first year, and having a substantial amount of terrain left over. So, you tell people that, and they had some idea, but it was still, like we were smoking something. It wasn't quite right.
I still have recurring nightmares about the Denver 1976 Olympic bid, or it wasn't just a bid, they had the right to put on the Olympics, but I was the lead reporter for the Denver Post and covering all of the various goings-on beginning in 1970 when the bid was awarded to Denver, and from then until the Colorado voters, as a matter of fact, turned it down because it was sort of a referendum on funding, but it was taken as a vote of confidence on the Olympics. And it was a tumultuous 3 years for me in trying to track down all the rumor and innuendo and charges. And of course, Colorado's three-term governor, Richard Lamb, at that time was a state representative, and he more or less led the opposition to the Olympics on a growth issue. He thought that having the Olympics would, as he said, and if I can quote Dick correctly, it would fan the fires of growth already burning out of control. If he could only see Colorado now.
Well, my feeling, of course, was positive vis-a-vis the Olympics and supportive, but from a standpoint of growth in the state of Colorado, I felt that the Olympics would bring everything into focus and get a lot of people and a lot of talents thinking about growth. Whereas, as it has turned out, the Olympics were turned down, the growth has happened, but it's been less controlled than it might have been had the Olympics been awarded and had we gone ahead. I'd like to make some points on that because I know what existed in Eagle County and the little local, the local towns prior to the advent of Vail and Snowmass and Aspen and so on. Those were poor communities. They were dying. The kids didn't go to college. They didn't have the money to go to school. And now we're sending more children to college. There's some prosperity there. I'm not so sure it behooves the people in Denver to call the shots for the local communities over there.
One of the problems that the Denver Olympics had was that the people who put it together spun a nice story to get the bid to convince the U.S. Olympic Committee and then ultimately the International Olympic Committee that Denver would be a good place with close-in events and things that appealed to them at the time, they told some little fibs about where they planned to have the races, some at Loveland and some the downhill on a mountain called Snicktow east of Loveland Pass, which they were going to rename Olympic Mountain or something or other. Then once they got the bid, they began to get down to the real business of deciding where they could actually have ski races. And at that time, Peter and Vail had on its charts concepting Beaver Creek, which we now take for granted as one of the really fine resorts in the state. But at that time, it was going to be built, but they weren't sure quite when and how. And Peter was going around turning people upside down and shaking to see how much money fell out of their pockets. There was a bit of planning and behind-the-scenes maneuvering between the Denver Organizing Committee and Vail Associates to move many of these ski events, the alpine events, to Beaver Creek, which then would be accelerated and would have been built 4 years earlier than its eventual 1980 opening, and that would have been the scene of the 1976 Olympic alpine events.
Alpine events, yeah. The steamboat obviously was, in the eyes of most Nordic people, for the cross-country jumping and so on, the ideal site. So it was really a matter of linking these places up. And if you look at France, if you look at some of the other countries, the events are not close. Certainly in Sapporo, Japan, they were spread out. It can be pulled off here, but it's a monumental task, and you develop a lot of facilities that may not have an after use, such as the major jumping hills and bobsled and so on. They're hard to maintain. We're very satisfied with the idea of the World's Championships, because we can put on the World's Championships using basically the terrain that we have opened up now, the lifts we have now. It's purely alpine skiing, and it fits our facilities very well.
I quite frankly don't think that in Peter's and my lifetime will we see an Olympics in Colorado.
Well, I think it's all for the better.
I think that the Colorado Ski Museum, and I think it's particularly appropriate that it is in Vail, which gets the single most amount of attendance of any resort in the country. It's also right there along I-70, so that so many people who go right by can stop in and see it. And it's very important that for a state whose economy and so much of its verve and excitement is centered around skiing should have a place like the museum where all this is sort of codified, put together, so that people can come in and see what this is all about. And can look at people like Peter, who have meant so much to the ski industry, and so many of the other great pioneers, Willie Scheffler and the Durkhems and Steve Bradley, and so many of the people who have been so vital in making this industry happen, be such a part of our everyday lives. They're taken for granted now. And I even enjoy going in, and it means so much to me. I think in the course of my work, I've learned so much about Colorado ski history, but I never fail to learn more when I go to the museum.
The ski racing aspect of it, Charlie, as you know, has really been beneficial to Colorado skiing, and certainly to Vail, and we've been long-time supporters. I think that's one of the reasons we prevailed over Sam Moritz last spring when we were awarded the 1999 World's Championships. People respected the fact that we had been in it, we'd supported it, and so on. And Sam Moritz 3 or 4 years ago was saying, "Who needs it?" Now they've decided they'd like to have it, but they're going to have to work. And I also think it's important in that just having the museum makes people think a piece of equipment of some kind or part of a ski lift or something. They think, oh my gosh, well, let's not throw that away. Let's hang on to it. It deserves to go into the ski museum. Instead of tearing things down, throwing things away and so on, we're saving some things, and those things are of interest.
Is there any truth that half the museum was put together out of your garage?
I wish it had all been put together, then I wouldn't have any of it. Yeah.
Well, it's become such a finely honed industry now. All of the major resorts, certainly those that appeal to tourists in any way, and even the more active, smaller resorts along the Front Range, Loveland, Eldora, Silver Creek, they must be very active in their promotion to survive in what's become a very sophisticated industry and market. Far-flung resorts, Telluride, Purgatory, Crested Butte, those a little farther down southwest, they've become remarkably fine ski resorts, and some of my favorite places to go simply because they haven't been grown up quite so much. There's still secrets and mysteries there for me. I know Telluride is a place I particularly love to go, and there's nothing more precious than the little town of Crested Butte. Sometimes their attendance, I think, is handicapped by transportation problems, and certainly they don't get the drive traffic off the Front Range. But they are just marvelous places to visit with very good skiing.
They offer a great deal of variety to the ski experience here in the state of Colorado. What happens is they get a feeling for Colorado, and they come back next year or the year after, and they'll try another different resort. So, yeah, we end up marketing the whole state on that basis.
Peter, one of the things that has been rather remarkable, I think, is the degree to which Europeans, particularly the British, are now coming to Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
It's very hard to get on a chairlift anymore and ride all day long at any ski resort, and maybe 8-10 times up the lift without being on the lift or on the gondola with someone from England.
And talking to Princess Diana on the way up.
Yeah, sure. The marketing effort toward Europe is beginning to pay off, of course, because the state of the dollar has made it very attractive for Europeans to come here, and also their snow conditions and just a natural curiosity about what we're about out here in the Wild West, I think, is drawing many Europeans to Colorado.
It's very interesting. We had I think a good example of that when we went down to South America, down to Rio, for the Ski Congress, where they had the vote and awarded the 1999 World Championships. We were bidding the Vail against Garmisch in Germany and Seibert in Switzerland. Garmisch came in with a kind of a typical display, lots of posters, so on, pictures of Garmisch and so on. And, beautiful pictures, and the idea of going to Garmisch would certainly have some appeal. Seibert did the same thing. We went down there, the Vail contingent, with an old Western bar and set that up. We had a magician dressed up as a gambler with long tails and so on, doing card tricks and big black hat. We had a cowboy with us who was making leather artifacts and different things and handing them out. But I don't think we realized what we were doing and how effective it was going to be. But what we were saying indirectly is, hey, look, come to Vail, come to Colorado, come to the West. It's friendly. We can relax, and you can come there, and if you want to stand at a bar and have a drink, you can do it. And it really worked. They've all seen the cowboy and Indians pictures for a long, long time, and that still intrigues them.